This story needs to be told. It's very important. It's very sad. It's what can happen to a community and nobody knows.
This is less a story about who did it than who didn't do it. A culture of killing and complicity.
There were moments where I remember him saying, I feel this story in my bones and I just want to do it justice.
Killers of the Flower Moon takes place right in the middle of the Reign of Terror, which was a series of murders by every possible means, by the way, from shootings to gradual poisonings to bombings of Osage men and women to bilk them out of their wealth that they'd accumulated at the discovery of oil on their land in the 1890s.
After having been relocated and removed from their ancestral homelands to Oklahoma, the reservation they have now, they also purchased it because they knew that was a language that the government would understand. And in doing so, they also had the keen insight to secure the subsurface mineral rights. So after having been in their new homelands for a pretty short amount of time, then oil was struck. And overnight, it made Osage, at the time in American history, at that time in the world, the richest people per capita anywhere.
A lot of people think, oh, when settlers came over, they killed a bunch of Native Americans for their land, and that was the end of it. And then you realize, like, no, in 1921, guess what? They came back to our land, and then they started killing us for our natural resources. So it's something that kept repeating itself through history.
60 people or so reported as murdered throughout the 1920s, but everyone feels that the real number was much higher than that. I wanted to do justice to the Osage, to their experiences and their memories, and I wanted to explore this territory that I've gone back to in most of my pictures where evil and friendship and respect are so close and even intertwined, I mean, you just can't pull them apart.
Bill Stepson, age 29. No investigation. Anna Sanford, age 41. No investigation.
It's a tale that is unique in the Gray Horse District, but also similar to other murders and theft which occurred and still do occur through the other districts.
This particular story with our people, we just didn't really talk about it a lot. It wasn't something we spoke about in our homes. I learned about it through, hearing other stories and then talking with my mother about it. And then, of course, when you're in school, you do hear things, but it wasn't actually taught even as a section in our Oklahoma history class. And it may not have been because it wasn't part of the curriculum that was allowable.
I said, Mom, did that really happen? I was probably 8, 9 years old. And she started telling me, yes, that happened. So she took me and she showed me these sites. And she talked about Bill Hale and some of the people he had working with him. And we had some of the Burkharts still around at that time. That part of our history was basically being kept quiet by some of the older generation. They didn't want to bring that back upon us again.
My dad said it was hush hush when he was young because it's so sad. He said, Margaret, they lost their family member. It's something that you sigh and you go on.
My great-grandfather was a tribal council member in the 20s. And my father was a tribal council member, and so I've always heard a little bit about the murders.
My great-grandfather was poisoned during this time and died. And my dad wasn't born until 1936, but my grandparents, who were both Osage, and they went through this in the 1920s, they were both born in the early 1900s. They were like incredibly helicopter parents with my dad and his siblings. My grandfather would say, "Where are you guys going? Where are you going to be? What time are you going to be?" This and that. And they were all just, I wouldn't say paranoid, but they didn't trust anybody outside the family. And so there's that generational trauma. My dad was overprotective and I'm overprotective of my son. And it's interesting how we're kind of alike like that.
Even families that weren't directly affected were still indirectly affected. I know my mother, her sisters, my grandparents were always very cautious and took measures to protect themselves and protect their home and their families.
My dad wrote a book called The Pipe for February, and he wrote it back. It got published in 2002. David Grann read my dad's book, and he called my dad, and he came up here, and my dad spent like a week to 10 days with them, and they just went around all over Osage County and talked about it. And then he really got in and hung out with all of the people that knew, and people like my dad's age.
When I first heard about the story, I had gone out to the Osage Nation, and this was all the way back in 2012. And I had seen this great panoramic photograph on the wall of the museum, and it was taken in 1924. It showed members of the Osage Nation along white settlers, and it looked very innocent. And I was struck, though, that a portion of the photograph was missing. And I asked the museum director, Catherine Redcorn, what had happened to it. And she had said it had contained this figure so frightening that she had decided to remove it. And then she pointed to the missing panel and she said, the devil was standing right there. And she went down into the basement and she retrieved an image of the missing panel. And it showed one of the killers of the Osage.
And if you go to the archives there, it's you still see the scars of how they feel about this man. He's torn out of the black and white photos. It's like the scars that he committed to the entire Osage Nation, and they're trying to extract him.
And at that time, I was so struck by the fact that the Osage had removed the photograph not to forget what had happened, but because they couldn't forget. And yet so many people, and I included myself among them, had never heard of this history. We had, in effect, excised it from our consciousness.
David Grann, when he came, was gracious enough to visit our museum and start on this thread of this story that we have been telling, but it's very hard for Native communities to get their story out there.
I began to find some evidence and indications of poisonings, of money that had been stolen from a guardian, of a suspicious death, of complaints of murder, hints of a systematic murder campaign. And it was interviews and conversations with members of the Osage Nation that shattered my original notion of this history, that this was not about a singular figure who had committed these crimes. It was really about a culture of killing. It was about many people who were complicit directly because of murders. It was about morticians who were covering up bullet wounds. It was about doctors who were administering poisons. It was about lawmen who were on the take. And it was about many others who remained complicit in their silence.
My grandfather told me that he and his brothers tried to get the officials from the morgue, morticians, to the doctors, to everything else to investigate, because they knew he was poisoned. But it was like you were asking these people to investigate themselves. So it just didn't go anywhere. And David Grann wrote a brilliant book. It was very well researched on the FBI files and things like that. I mean, it was done really well.
This was an endeavor in which, from the top to the bottom, it was corruption. When you look into things of this nature, anytime money's involved, just follow the money.
When the book came out, everybody rushed to read it to really see who their family was in there, what was going on. And he did such a wonderful job in research.
Marty reached out to me early on. And the thing that just struck me right from the beginning was just his insatiable curiosity. He just wanted to learn about this history. He wanted to learn about the story. He wanted to figure out all its hidden dimensions.
It's an incredible thing to have a film of this magnitude come into your community to open these very fresh wounds that haven't really fully closed.
I think it helped and relaxed a lot of the people that were very skeptical on if somebody that was not Osage that was doing this movie, and if they were going to show that the Osages were really human beings, noticing who we were truly inside and not just being murdered all over the place. And him having several meetings with the leaders, but also with the community. I heard of one of them, he shook everybody's hand and took pictures with them, and they would tell him a little story about their own personal things, and he really sat down and listened to them.
We're making a film set in Osage County about a tragic historical event that is central to the Osage history. So, of course, naturally, you try to have as many Osage actors as you can, as many Osage extras and crew members, technical advisors, community members. I would never have even thought of doing it any differently because their presence meant everything to me and to the film.
Martin Scorsese did meet with elders. My grandmother was among one of them, and met with the chief multiple times in order to, I guess you'd say, get it right.
Talking with direct descendants of the victims, their great-grandchildren, a lot of them who we worked with in the film. Once he met them and got to sit down with all of them and felt how important the story was to them, it became a part of him as a filmmaker. And I don't think I've ever seen him as obsessed with telling a story correctly.
As in the past, as we all know, back in the 50s and 60s, that a lot of movies probably wasn't historically accurate, but now they're letting the tribes have an input.
Having Osage people in every aspect of production as we made this film, it was essential to make the film as strong as it is. You can't tell a story like this without that community involvement, yet people do. That's been the precedent for such a long time. So we wanted to do something that we were following what Osage were telling us to do. You know, not just to make our film feel authentic, you know, that's such a tricky word, but to do right by this history in the community.
You could have authenticity, but authenticity could be cold and factual. This is different. It's warm and human. And as human beings, we carry and transmit our histories with our words. But here's the thing. Also the way we stand, our gestures, the way we move, all our body language, the rhythms of our speech, and our silences.
Maybe have a party for the town and maybe invite another band.
It does not do to talk to this man. Evil surrounds my heart. Many times I cry, and this evil around my heart comes out of my eyes. I close my heart and keep what is good there.
The thing that we wanted to do here is not to make a documentary about the Osage, and that was very important to how we worked on this movie. They would be all over the movie, but not in a documentary way.
I think one of the most important critical decisions made in the development of this process that set it on the right course was the decision to film in Osage County on Osage lands, so that there would be the communication with the Osage people and that there would be a connection to the place and the people where these things took place.
What I saw in my time on the set was young people, children, mothers, grandparents, all involved, all happy, smiles. It's a unique opportunity for us to be a part of something special.
Research here for me is everything, in most cases, especially in this film. Marianne and I worked together for years now, and she is more than a researcher, really. She brings so much to the process that she becomes a real creative collaborator.
I amass just as much reference material as I can, almost creating a library for the film. Newspaper articles about the event, photographs of the time period. I go and order courtroom trial transcripts, which are a font of information about how people spoke and details of how events played out.
The depth and the volume of the research actually led to a very strong mutual respect between our team and the entire Osage community. And it was a relationship that grew closer and closer as we went along.
The nation has been incredible. Every request that we've had, we've gotten a positive response to. They've helped us in innumerable ways.
Once we were able to sort of prove to the members of the Osage community that we really cared about doing things the right way, then we were able to meet these artisans and people who've been doing it for each other for years and years and generations, really, and able to tap into that. Blankets were a big thing for us because you see pictures of blankets or some old black and white photos, and it doesn't really capture those ornate decorations that are attached to them that people had done to those. So we needed those people who actually still make them today to say, oh, well, this is my great-grandmother's blanket. Look at this.
My main consideration was portraying the Osage in a really proper, historical, truthful, and beautiful way. Just their artwork, their beadwork, their ribbon work, their finger weaving, it was so unique to them. And I've studied many of the different Native nations, and these were so distinct and so different.
All the clothing I've seen looks very accurate, and many of the things I've seen are really beautiful. My grandmother, she always wore the traditional Osage clothing. So what I've seen matches that time for them and for my aunts as well.
The clothing that truly represents men and women is the ribbon work that we wear. And so in trading for ribbon and different things that would have come into our lands, we incorporated that into our clothing also. And there are exquisite patterns, very difficult, with like 15 ribbons, where someone is basically doing its applique, but it is cut and fold. And there are certain family patterns that people will create that by changing just a corner changes that pattern, but it's that specific one for men and women.
The Osage could afford to do home movies. It was like $1,800 a minute. And they made incredible movies of their travels, their dances, their dinners, their weddings that I could rely on and know it was accurate.
I just started reading. I read trial transcripts. I read history books about the Osage. I read as much as I could. What I try to do is create a world, and the more you can put it together, you know, all the elements, the better it is. Because if you go to Gray Horse, the cemetery is right near the village, and the water is right next to the village, and the homes are built around it. And what I've always tried to do is give the actors and the director 360 degrees where they could shoot to their heart's content.
It's supposed to be a suicide, you dumbbell. You didn't tell him to leave the gun. I don't know why I told him.
We've chosen locations in the northern part of the county, in the southern part of the county, in the western part of the county, and the eastern part of the county. So we're all over the place. Every day you hop in your car, if you make the rounds to locations, you might put 300 or 400 miles on.
We're out on a ranch. We are 5 miles from the main road. So we're not in a parking lot and the back lot and making a ranch look like a ranch. So we really had to anticipate anything that we might need to tell the stories of our village, or tell the stories of Molly's homestead and her ranch, or Hale's ranch, the cattle ranch. All that stuff was created from scratch, brought out to those places.
And
In Osage County, we have 3 districts, is what we call them. And they are the Hominy District, the Pawhuska District, and the Gray Horse District. And the Gray Horse District is where this particular story, which is Killer of the Flower Moon, from the book and the movie, is being depicted from. It's from the Gray Horse point of view. The book is more about just the whole entire time frame that happened here and who all was involved, instead of it through the eyes of the person who was the main target or the people that were the targets.
most Osage don't live past 50. With these women dying, with how Osage suffer from illness, you have to make it the head rights come to you.
Bill Hale was a rancher who would move cattle through the Osage Reservation from Kansas to Texas. So he ended up learning to speak Osage that time. So we wanted him to kind of talk like that. We wanted him to sound like somebody who has spent a huge portion of their time among the Osage people.
When I met with Mr. De Niro, he talked about his Osage coach, a young man who I've watched grow up, and that young man's becoming very good in our language, and now he's coaching Robert De Niro in our language.
We met every day for at least an hour, and we practiced just his lines. And then one of the things is we didn't want him to sound like a speaker. We didn't want him to sound like somebody who had been talking Wajaja their whole life. And I think we were very successful.
I think De Niro said it himself when he said William K. Hale was the banality of evil. And he's played a lot of pretty horrible people up on the screen, but this one has a duplicity.
Bob and I go back over 55 years. So we kind of had the same experience in a way, growing up in the first 20 years of our lives. And he explores characters, goes there, stays with them. And of course, in doing so, you take on what they call challenges. And in this case, to play a man who was kind and respectful on the one hand, and greedy, murderous thug on the other hand. And of course, we've seen characters like this in many movies, of powerful men. But what usually happens is that the actor puts on a benign front, but he kind of tips the audience off with little hints and gestures. We did it so that we make it clear that he believed his own story. He really loved the Osage, and they loved him.
Y'all know where I am. I'm easy to find.
Thank you, Mr. Hale. Your friendship has always been greatly appreciated.
I'll do anything to help the Osage in their plight, in their vale of tears.
It's inexplicable, as they say. It's contradictory. But you see it all the time in political leaders and gangsters. So for many people, it's too uncomfortable to acknowledge. But Bob De Niro brought it fully alive.
Actually, Marty said to me early on, I thought he would be bigger as a villain. But it's that quietness that allows him to seep his evil into the movie.
You're here because of me. Let me help you. Let me give you my advice, my consultation.
The white people back then resented the Osages having this money, and they were like, they don't know what to do with it. We know what to do with the money. Buy more property, do more development, that kind of stuff. That's why they set up the Guardians, and then that's why they started killing the Osages, because they would either marry in and become a husband or a wife and then kill that person and their family members so that they would get the oil and gas royalties.
The Osage were considered incompetent at that time and weren't allowed to be in charge of their own wealth. And Molly getting a caretaker like Ernest as her husband, it was somewhat advantageous in some respects for her. For him, he obviously had genuine feelings for her, but realized that there was tremendous wealth in the family. The complexity of how that relationship unfolded is shown in the movie in a very interesting way, and we played with how much we wanted to show the audience as far as Ernest's complicity in some of these murders.
Was he murdered or did he kill himself? Do you know?
I don't know.
Pretty much every picture that Leo and I have made together, he's played troubled or troubling characters with complexity, many layers, a number of them often contradictory. I mean, that's what he responded to in the character of Ernest, who is doing two things at the same time. He's marrying a woman he loves and raising a family with her, and, very likely harming her, and working with his brother and others to kill off the rest of her family on the orders of his uncle. Then Leo doesn't like to be comfortable, thankfully. He and I share that. We don't want to be comfortable with this stuff. We want to get into the real truth of human nature if we can.
All of it fascinated me, and so I wanted to be a part of this story, and thank God Martin Scorsese felt the same way.
The first day that I worked with him, my hands were shaking naturally because it's Leonardo DiCaprio. But The nerves about it faded away when we were just so focused on doing justice to our characters.
You got money on this place? No, no. Let's go then.
Molly is a traditional Osage woman who, despite the forces for change around her, retains her traditional ways and attitudes. They call it one of the resistors.
It says here she spent $319.05 for meat at the grocery. Don't you think that's an awful lot of meat for what she needs?
Yes, Mr. Beatty.
Well, you look after that, won't you?
Yes.
We did not discover Lily. Lily is a fabulous actress who has been acting for a number of years. I could right away have a little bit of a sense that I thought that Marty would respond to Lily. We are just the lucky people who get to cast her in this where her soul and her essence just shines.
Oh, I need you.
Do you have any idea who might want to harm you?
All along the way, Lily was meeting people in the Osage community, talking to them, coming back to us with new ideas, new questions, enriching what we had in our scripting. And she was so determined to do right by the Osage people, to get the details of their lives and their shared culture right.
What was that?
That's how you are.
We know historically that Osage people were speaking their own language in the 1920s, despite forced assimilation, where they were forced to speak English. Osage people did continue to speak it, albeit perhaps just at home. And so it was important that we have their language spoken.
There's often a perception, I think, non-natives hold that there's a Native American language. There are 562, I believe, federally recognized nations and another several hundred that are not federally recognized. So we're talking about hundreds of tribes with, even if they speak similar languages, there's going to be different dialects. I speak very little of my own language, Blackfeet. I can introduce myself. I know a number of animals, colors, numbers, basic things that when you're raised without any first language speakers in your immediate everyday periphery, you just pick up the small things, a lot of times the bad words. So I was so scared I was going to give a Blackfeet accent and intonation to Osage words.
Oh, you just called me a coyote, didn't you?
Echo. The words were very difficult for me initially. It took several months before even stepping foot on Osage land of doing Zoom meetings to just get my mouth prepared for these words in this language.
She really cares, and I really do feel really good about her. When I did hear her during one scene, it started with her speaking Osage, and when she started speaking, it was just like hearing our old people talking again. She really became so good at it. She even changed some of her lines that were supposed to be in English. She wanted to say them in Osage.
With my character in particular, she had a very close bond with Molly. That's what stood out to me because, they were the last two left at the end. And I felt so much empathy for Molly because of how much she must have felt, like what she went through, and the pain and the loss of losing everyone around her, and then one of her children must have been so immense. And I was telling Lily I'm proud of her for taking that on.
She embodied that character. She took on in every moral fiber of her being the soul of this woman and expressed it through her performance in a very profound way.
It's a love story, despite what happens in it, which involved then taking the script as it stood and sort of turning it sort of inside out. Instead of coming at the story from the outside in, we were inside it already, and the outside comes in later on in the picture. And so this was a major change that we worked on.
I read a lot of the manuscripts of his testimony and his letters, and it was an organic love story. Doesn't discount the fact that he did horrific things on his own and led a double life.
It was kind of cool that we both walked into it feeling like this may be kind of an impossible task to tell what this love story is in a way that is going to connect with people and feel real.
Lily and Leo were working constantly with Marty during the shoot, actually, shaping that love story and coming up with ideas to show you how much they loved each other.
Oh, you gonna try to wake the kids up now.
Could Ernest have been slowly poisoning his Osage wife, Molly? We knew he really loved her and she really loved him. And perhaps maybe both things were true. Murder and exploitation, affection and love. He was at the very least aware of the murders of her sisters, and he was probably involved in those.
I remember when I visited the set, and they were shooting a scene in a doctor's office. And I had written about those doctors who were suspected of administering poisonings. And I watched the scene in their actual doctor's office. They had obviously cleaned it out and fixed it up some, but it was the same floors and the same ceiling and the same dust that had been there. I kept thinking about what it must have been like for the actors to feel that connection, almost that unspoken connection, that weight to the past. And I think it is details like that that give the film its power and its originality, its truth, its emotional truth.
Shooting in the location where it actually happened means so much as far as really feeling the energy of what happened. When we shoot in Fairfax, for example, we shoot a few blocks away from where Rita and Bill's real house blew up. And just going by there and seeing the foundation of it still there and what happened 100 years ago, the land still feels it, the energy is still there.
Immediately my mind went to, how many stories are there like this? And I've learned from Osage people and from Native cast members just the vastness of the truth behind American history and just beginning to scratch the surface of how many stories there are that are similar to this one.
What has come to our reservation that doesn't belong here, and it's them. They're like buzzards circling our people.
Yeah.
They're gonna pick us body clean, leave nothing. I think it opened up an opportunity to have all factions looked at, being a person that lost some of the folks here. I know that there were hundreds that were killed and murdered here. I sit in a position today that has to have federal laws just to protect my people from something that is their birthright. The situation of the ones we lost has effects all the way through tomorrow. The other people who didn't know about it, I think that it was a very eye-opener. It's like a snowball. It gets bigger and bigger the more you tell this story. And at the end, it's a true tragedy to happen to a people.
The people you see around you as Osages, they're survivors. And they not only survive, but they know how to put a beauty to it. We persevere. We make it through.
The respect that the production company and Mr. Scorsese and his team have brought is more than we had hoped. It's really good to see such sensitivity, and it carries on what David Grann did with his respect for us.
Martin Scorsese, of course, looked at this as, a microcosm for a much bigger story. a story of American greed and capitalism, yet also highlighting the fact that the Osage are still here and they're still vital.
Obviously, I see parallels with events occurring in the world today, but I want audiences to draw their own parallels and just experience it for themselves.